Riley here from the Awesome Players, and we're getting ready for probably our last ride of the year. So I'm trying to get all the camera gear organized, and then I'm waiting for Dave and Chris to show up, and then we're going to trailer over to Henriks, unload, try to do the Scotch Road in winter conditions. You can see some of the gear we got to charge up. So we got a GoPro 3, a GoPro 3 Plus, two first-gen GoPro HDs, the Senna 20 headset, and of course on the back of my 3 Plus we've also got the Bluetooth transmitter, so everything should be recorded. So it should be interesting. We got some new shirts. Dave!
Yay!
You ready for the last ride?
Absolutely. It's only -7 and snowing.
Alright.
Not really snowing.
We got the new mega ramp set up.
That's good.
Chris, are you ready to ride the ramp?
I am.
Alright, let's do it.
I'm always ready to ride the ramp.
You start on the ice-covered metal ramp, then you get onto the ice-covered plywood, up the cold ramp,
You guys didn't have the nards to
and then
like,
into the truck.
on your own?
Is it going to start with your fancy lithium battery the
It might.
size of a pea?
It might.
No.
Give her! It's coming. Oh, almost.
Oh,
Those lithium batteries.
Come on,
are not really
baby!
cold.
Needs to be warmed up.
Those lithium batteries in the cold are shit.
It's going, it's going.
They're shit.
well, it's also tiny. Have you seen the size of it?
Yeah, I know.
It's about as big as that GPS. Oh,
I think one
she's
more
going to go.
do it.
She's going to go. Uh-oh.
You're fondling my motorcycle. Oh, you put a new sticker on it?
No,
or
I'm
what?
just warming it up. Come on, baby! So the plan was to load up the bikes, head to Ontario, do a nice little ride and see how far we could get, given that there would certainly be more snow there than there was in the city. And then we would end up at Henriks and meet a few other players, hopefully, have supper, spend the night, and then come home to our loved ones. Yep, she's in there. Chris, what's happening?
It's fucking cold. We're going riding.
Well, we got summer in
We got this trailer and the truck stuck.
We just got stuck in the snow with a pickup truck.
Which is a good indication that
Yeah.
we're going to be in for some fun on the trail.
Yeah, but the truck only has 4-wheel drive. These have 1-wheel drive.
Chris's bike, on the other hand, is.
When we got out to Grenville, which is just across the river from Hawkesbury, the one thing we found out was that it was a lot windier, so it felt a lot colder. We did shoot a bit of video here of getting the bike started, but the wind was howling, so the audio is just horrific. So what we ended up having to do, though, was jumpstart the HP2, because Chris had installed this tiny, tiny lithium battery, and with the cold weather, it just wasn't up to it. So I had a jump starter pack in the truck, but we couldn't get a good connection with the alligator clips that came with this jump starter pack. So then we tried to connect the jump starter pack to the bike using these little motorcycle jumper cables I carried, and we weren't having much luck there. And finally, we just hooked it up to the big battery in the F150, and it jumped. And then we were hopeful that it would start again, because it wasn't going to be a lot of fun trying to jumpstart this thing on the trail.
And I really wiggled it.
Just crud! Is
Yeah.
Chris happy?
So with everybody's machine finally running, off we went. We really didn't know what to expect condition-wise. The roads so far had been clear on the drive up. So we pulled out of the little parking area here and started to head down the Scotch Road. The Scotch Road is a road we've done many times, and if you've watched any of our videos, you've probably seen us riding the Scotch Road in the summer. We've actually done it a couple of times in the spring where there was still a little snow, and in those cases we made it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I did have this little backpack on my GoPro that was supposed to record the intercom. And it did record the intercom, but there's a setting on that backpack where you can have a mix of the intercom sound and ambient sound. And sadly, it's a horrible option because I enabled it. Without it, all you hear is the intercom, and it's deathly silent, so it sounds kind of odd because you don't really hear any engine noise. But if you mix the two together, the microphone on the camera picks up your voice, and so does the microphone for the intercom, but there's a delay, so you get this bad echoey sound. So you really won't be hearing much of the intercom chatter. We also figured out pretty quick, once we started using that little recording box, that we didn't want to record what we were saying on the intercom because there could tend to be, how should I say, some salty language, and sometimes when the trail or the ride gets a little bit boring, the boys will tell a story, and some of those stories would probably get our YouTube channel demonetized, to say the least. So you won't be seeing much of the little intercom record box in future videos. The road started off pretty decent, and then we got to some sections where it was covered in kind of a hard-packed snow-ice combo. But it was definitely rideable. You could see that if you tried to put any power down to the road, you would get a little wheel spin. Eventually, we got to where what we would call the Scotch Road really starts, where it's a dirt road, and the first thing is a big hill, and it was pretty obvious that that hill had not been plowed. I don't think they plow this road at all in the wintertime. There's some cottages along there, but I think people must get in by snowmobile or something because I don't believe it is fully maintained all year long. Dave decided to try and increase his chances of making it by airing down his tires. He was also running K60s, which were the least aggressive tires in our group, so he would need all the help he could get. I decided to go first. And I wasn't sure if the best approach was just to bonsai it up here or try to modulate power, but it became quite apparent that there was not much traction to be had. Sometimes on snow like this, you can kind of dig down, and underneath it, there's kind of a gritty, gravelly layer. But here, especially in the wheel ruts, it was pretty obvious that was just ice. Chris gave it a little more jam and made it a little farther up the hill. But even outside of the wheel ruts, it was slippery. And Dave, with the crappiest tires amongst us, actually made it the farthest up the hill. You can see there was not much traction to be had here. Eventually I did manage to chew down to something underneath the snow, but it was still super slippery, and if you look at what I was spraying, you'd think I'd have traction because it looks like I was spraying sand there. But I think it was just frozen sand because it was not giving me any bite. Dave came down to give me a hand. Chris was still trying to waddle his way up the hill on the HP2. We had a little powwow and came to the pretty obvious conclusion that there was no way we were going to make it all the way to the other end of this road, because this was certainly not going to be the toughest spot. So yes, I think with the three of us, the douche rope, a lot of sweat, we could have made it to the top of this hill. But unless we were interested in pulling these bikes for 20 kilometers or so, we were not going to be able to make it. So we turned around and started heading back to the truck.
So the plan is to start drinking earlier? It's not a bad plan. I've seen worse plans.
Then Chris stalled the HP2, thought he had it in neutral, and went to let out the clutch, and she was dead.
Uh-oh. Shit.
So instead of trying to jump start it bike to bike, we came up with the brilliant idea of a push start.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, but okay.
I have to admit, I did not have a lot of faith in this push start plan, given that the road was icy and his rear tire was frozen solid, but the HP2 started up right away. The ride back, I think, was a little less nerve-wracking because we knew what to expect. Here in the sections where there was actually sand on the road, it made a pretty big difference. The only pucker factor part really was the corners. You could feel that front end did not have a lot of bite. But nobody dropped their bike and we got back to the truck. And we were wondering if we were just going to cash it in for the day when we noticed at the end of this parking lot, it looked like there was some sort of trail heading off to the right.
Hey boys, there's a road here. Chris! Hey boys, come this way.
It looked like some sort of an animal might have been down this road, but it was pretty obvious there hadn't been a lot of vehicle traffic. I think there might have been some snowmobiles or ATVs or something down here before the most recent snow, because the tracks were kind of filled in a bit. Yeah, there was pretty good traction underneath this snow. You could actually steer and give it a little bit of gas, and I think this is because it hadn't been compressed. I think the snow on the road, the vehicles compress it, and then it kind of turns icy. So this was actually quite rideable.
There's a ditch here. Oh. Rather steep, crazily steep. Insane.
The trail went on for some time, and then it hooked to the right, and I could see there was some sort of a ditch here. The kind of ditch that wouldn't be a big obstacle in the summer. This looked a little more challenging given the ice at the bottom and the snowy banks. We decided that it might be smart just to take a little look-see on foot and really figure out what was going on here. It was slippery walking down there, and someone had put a piece of plywood or something. There was a little overhanging snowdrift. Decided to just break that off and also see if there was any little hidden goodies in there. And of course, I wasn't all that worried about it, considering the plan would be to send Chris across first.
Oh, I am. No, but we can cross this, boys. You might want to get off. Get up.
And then Chris made it across and made it look surprisingly easy. And Dave, who had seemed very reluctant, I think was inspired by Chris's performance, but still, he thought it might be safer to just kind of walk the bike down.
You ready, Freddie? You got it.
And after having seen two different theories on what was going to be the easiest way to cross this ditch, I pretty much decided that riding through it was a lot less work. And yes, you heard it here first. Chris stalled the HP2. And one thing was for sure, we were not going to be push starting a 1200cc motorcycle in this snow. So it was time to break out the little motorcycle jumper cables that we hadn't had much success with earlier and make them work. Otherwise, it was going to be a nice long tow back to the truck. The battery on the F800 is not easily accessible, and neither is the positive pole of the starter motor, so we have to kind of take off the faux gas tank cover which means removing the seat, removing, I think it's 4 or 5 Torx screws, and then you can see the top of the battery.
This is the best snow ride Dave's ever been on. That's what Dave's thinking. So we didn't videotape the jump start.
We didn't videotape the push start either.
No. Well, we had our helmet cameras on.
Which went remarkably well.
We've had a push start and now 2 successful jump starts.
And we're getting it down to a science.
And now Chris has the jumper cables right in his pants. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Dave, why are you putting that panel back on? We're going to have to jump start your bike.
With everyone's bikes once again running, we set off with Super Dave in the lead. You can see the sun is almost setting, although it's probably only 3-something o'clock, 4 o'clock. So we also didn't have a lot of time, and we'd have to keep in mind that we did not want to get into a situation out here where we were going to have to spend an hour or so doing something, because then we were going to be doing it in the dark. And as nice as the day seemed with the sun shining, once that sun drops, it was going to get cold. Up ahead in front, Dave could see things were looking a little rougher up ahead, so he stopped, and Chris passed him on the left to go take a look. Up until this point, the traction had been surprisingly good. You can see there was a lot of animal traffic here. There was a lot of hoof prints, and I don't know if it's because those animals were coming up to this little water crossing here to have a drink. It really was quite bizarre, because underneath this snow there was good traction, and thankfully Chris hadn't stalled it, because that would have been a fun spot to try and jump start the bike. Chris gave us the thumbs up, and due to the magical effects of peer pressure, I was next. And that rear tire just bit in, and up I went. Dave still seemed a bit unconvinced despite 2 successful attempts, but he went for it. And the somewhat street-oriented K60 managed to chew its way to the top. Chris and I kept going, and then at one point I was looking in my mirror and I did not see the headlight of the F700, so I figured something had happened. And through the magic of the intercom, I was able to find out that Dave had pounded it in. But since Dave hadn't turned his camera on, it didn't count. Dave eventually caught up with us, and then the first order of business was getting his camera rolling. And there you can see the clap, so that I could get everybody back in sync. And then we were off. This trail was definitely some sort of animal highway, but it was still passable. I was having a little trouble climbing that hill, but once again, surprising amount of traction. The worst sections were these sections where instead of it being gravel, they were more fist-sized flat rocks, because those rocks were slippery. And you can hear this is actually a hill. It's a pretty long, slow climb.
Holy shit! I just got speared by a stick and went right up inside my helmet. Woo!
Here you can see from Chris's cam that Dave was having a little harder time getting up those hills. But by just grinding through the crust, even the K60 was able to find traction, and without any help, Dave was able to get up the hill. And behind him you can see Chris with the HP2 wasn't having as much trouble. Part of that I think is Chris's tires, but also the HP2 just doesn't spin up. Those F bikes, once they start spinning, that motor likes to wind up. Well, I think the Boxers just have some sort of innate resistance to spinning. And you can hear the uh-oh. I had come to a nice gully with a decent downhill and what looked like a pretty decent uphill. So it was time to do a little foot recce and head down there and see what was what.
Huh. I'll switch it off. Huh. It went right across the... Yeah. Oh, wait. Oh. There's no chance in hell of mine getting up that. Not unless we do shoot.
So after a little powwow, we decided that given the time and the general condition of the trail, as you can see here, this would be potentially doable if you got lucky. And I'm pretty sure with 3 guys we could drag any motorcycle up this hill. But we didn't know what was farther down the trail, and the sun was setting. So it was time to let discretion be the better part of valor and turn around and head back. Chris was in front on the ride back, with Dave as the meat and the manwich and me bringing up the rear. I think on the ride back Dave was feeling bad that he'd crashed earlier and forgot to have the camera running. So he got to this little soft spot and was nice enough to lay the 700 down on the ground for us. And it was kind of interesting, he just shot off right into the side of the trail. We got the F700 back up on 2 wheels, and off we went. A little bit farther down the trail, another slippery spot, and down Dave went. Dave's body got a little more distance this time, so he was improving. The hot engine had created a little cloud of steam from the snow, which fogged up the camera. The first little stream crossing that had seemed so daunting as an uphill was actually a little scarier as a downhill because you did not want to fall into that water. So Dave approached very cautiously. You can see that front wheel locking. And now I was just hoping Dave was going to hit the bottom here and then get on the gas so we didn't have to stand in that water and help push. Dave did get on the throttle, and without any drama, he was through. The cold is not good for the GoPro batteries. And here you can see Chris on the right as Dave gets to the last little obstacle, our first little trench. And right now his is the only GoPro still running. I don't think Dave did a lot of this kind of riding back in the UK. And here, just not enough speed. He slid back, but it wasn't a lot of work to get him out. Chris came up on the left and grabbed one of his crash bars, and with a little tug and a little gas, the F bike was out of the hole and back on the trail.
Nice! Wait for it. Ow! Make sure to lift with the lower back. Nice! Kill it. We'll put Dave's bike in the truck. Yeah. Because it's going to be a lot easier with power, and we'll put yours in the trailer. So what's the plan, boys?
Let's go home and drink.
Drink. And hopefully Sir Henrik has prepared.
And maybe Jason is alive.
Hiding LK60s. Great on the road. Good on gravel.
Off-road. I told you that.
Well, no, they're not too bad off-road.
Yeah, he's done pretty well.
They are horrible in the snow and ice. No traction whatsoever.
With the sun a few minutes away from setting, it was time to load up the bikes and head over to Henriks for a few beverages and some hot food. Now it was time for a super sexy low-angle shot of the Ford driving over one of the old GoPros. So we got everything lined up. The headlights were on so you could see the truck with the nice sunset in the background. Even with the bald tires, the four-wheel drive got her going, and then the handle for the lift on the trailer was perfectly positioned to smack the camera. So we had to do this pickup shot so we could get a seamless montage that looks something like this. When we got to Henriks, we were joined by cousin Charles from Toronto, who actually had been promoted to Uncle Charles. Jason was also there. He was supposed to have joined us on this ride, but he had trouble getting his bike going. It's stored outside. And of course, there was Dave and Chris and myself and our host, Henrik. As you can see, everyone got their new Awesome Players polo shirts. The shirts were actually pretty horrible. I ordered them online. The embroidery turned out fine, but the cut of the shirts was really bizarre. So don't order shirts from vistaprint.ca. The mugs were nice, and of course we also had some kind of rubberized badges I made up, and those turned out quite nice with Velcro on the back. Anyways, we have a pretty strict rule that we shoot the riding, but we do not shoot the cavorting after the rides. So this is where the night fades to black. The next morning, everybody was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Cousin Charles, the morning after.
There's got to be a morning after.
Dave, the morning after.
What an awesome night.
Yeah.
Chris, your fork seal stopped leaking once all the oil was out.
That sounds about right.
How are you this morning?
Good. I didn't drink very much. I feel great.
You sound scratchy.
Yeah, it's because of my cold.
Jason,
Yeah. Sir, yes, sir.
how are you? Now that you've been hitting the nuts with the car door.
My nuts better than he was.
Any contact is better than no contact.
That's right.
We hear the geriatric car parking, Grand Marquis, Crown Vic.
All right.
And there is our host with the royal wave.
Thank you very much. Nice meeting you.
Very dismissive attitude. Yep.
How are you this morning, Henrik? And you say you're of average height for Central Europe?
Central European gentleman of average height.
Charles, what do you want Dave to do?
Would you like Dave to stick his head in this car and take a good whiff?
You want him to smell the rental car?
Yes. Whiff is a Canadian term for smell.
Have you ever played Smell the Rental Car, Dave?
I've rented many cars in my life.
What do you think
Some
of
of
this
them
one?
smell.
What do you think of this one?
What is that?
What is that smell?
It's like toilet bowl cleaner.
It smells like a dentist's. To be
Yeah.
honest. Like a
Or Lysol, maybe.
oral hygienist. Yeah, Lysol. That somebody's done something disgusting in
Yeah,
that car,
yep.
and they've tried to clean it up.
Bingo!
That's not good.
Does it smell in the trunk? It does.
Yeah, it smells all over.
Yeah, they've Lysoled that to death.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I predict, I think
And
vomit is
what
probably...
franchise was this rented
This is
from?
Dollar Rent-A-Car.
$1. Maybe you got to go to $2. $2 rental.
Actually, there's some suspicious-looking stains on the seat. So
Are there? Ooh. I guess he didn't make it to the bank in time. Okay, what temperature is it there, Dave?
0, actually 0.
Oh, it's only 0. It's going to start like a charm.
Gonna start. It's easy.
Chris, are you watching?
This is how a bike starts, Chris.
If you would like to sport an Awesome Players sticker, head over to awesomeplayers.com and hit the order tab and you can buy some there. You can also head over to Facebook and send us a picture or a video or chat with us there. And so ends another little adventure of the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club.
He's dead.